Good afternoon, everyone. Let everybody come in. Hope you're having a wonderful Thursday. All right, as folks are coming in, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to our webinar on the future of apprenticeship in a post-pandemic world of work. My name is Dina Empty, and I am the Program Director of the Education and Workforce team at the Council of State Governments. Thank you to you all for joining us. Today, we're going to be talking about a critical component of workforce development, employer retention, and retraining, apprenticeships. Apprenticeships are an industry-driven, high-quality career pathway where employers can develop and prepare their future workforce, and individuals can obtain paid work experience, classroom instruction, and a nationally recognized portable credential. I know that apprenticeships can provide key opportunities for individuals as they look to move into the world of work. As we've seen over the last 2 years, apprenticeships have proven remarkably resilient during the pandemic. And thanks to the hard work of many state officials around the country, many of you who are on this call, apprenticeship opportunities have continued to expand into new fields. This afternoon, we are going to hear about apprenticeship inclusion, expansion, resiliency, and sustainability, as reflected in a recent report developed by the Council of State Governments in collaboration with the U.S. Department of Labor's State Exchange on Employment and Disability, or SEED. And we'll also hear from a great lineup of state officials who are hard at work making all of that a reality. Our overall goal is to learn about innovative approaches states are utilizing to include individuals with disabilities in apprenticeships and how you can utilize these methods within your state. Before we get underway, I want to introduce one of CSG's greatest partners in disability employment policy. Today, we have Nadia Mossberg from the U.S. Department of Labor. She's the Senior Policy Advisor and Project Manager at the Office of Disability Employment Policy, and she is the federal lead for SEED. She leads the State Exchange on Employment and Disability, a unique federal, state, local collaboration that supports state and local governments in adopting and implementing inclusive policies and best practices that lead to increased employment opportunities for people with disabilities and a stronger, more inclusive American workforce and economy. Nadia, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much, Dina, and hello everyone. And I just want to thank you all for being here today and allowing me to share a few brief remarks to kick off this exciting webinar. As you heard, I'm a Senior Policy Advisor in ODEP, or the Office of Disability Employment Policy. We're a small, non-regulatory agency within the U.S. Department of Labor that works to increase the workplace success of people with disabilities. We do that through a wide range of policy work, and also by collaborating with employers and all levels of government. When people think of ODEP, they correctly assume that much of our work is at the federal level. But what's so exciting is how we've been able to extend our policy reach by leveraging partnerships, interagency coordination, and hands-on work with state and local governments and policymakers. The latter, of course, has primarily been through our State Exchange on Employment and Disability, or SEED, which is an initiative that many of you know well. SEED is a unique federal-state collaboration, as Dina said, that helps states and localities implement policies that advance employment of people with disabilities and strengthen their own economies in the process. Put simply, SEED acts as an educator and hands-on policy guide. We offer background on disability employment related policy practices, show you where your inclusion intersects with your own policy agenda, and if needed, help you shape your own effective policies and put them into practice. Our approach is rooted in the sharing and adoption of past policy practices because we realize that while every state has unique challenges and opportunities, many policy actions can be successfully replicated by others. We are immensely proud of SEED and the important work it continues to accomplish with intermediate organizations like CSG and others. SEED has been instrumental in helping state and local stakeholders implement crucial policies that advance the employment of people with disabilities. And that's why we're so excited to be collaborating with CSG on this webinar today. to promote policy options and state examples around inclusive apprenticeship and work-based learning opportunities, to share information about strategies to help improve employment opportunities for people with disabilities, and also support employer needs for finding and securing qualified candidates. As the economy recovers and individuals return to the workplace, the design and implementation of inclusive workforce policies help us not only rebuild, but rebuild stronger than before. As you policymakers continue to steer your pandemic responses at the state and local levels, it is especially important to ensure that these new policies align with disability and civil rights laws. It's all part of the pursuit of full inclusion and the American workforce that accurately reflects the diversity and skill of its citizens, including those with disabilities. But it's also smart business sense, because in the recovering job market that is facing key labor shortages, people with disabilities can help fill the gaps and be part of the job solution. So advancing employment of people with disabilities is an obvious and fruitful way to bolster your economies and build stronger workplace cultures that embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm so pleased that today we're going to be exploring some of these strategies and hearing how states are implementing policies, programs, and practices around inclusive apprenticeship. And before I turn things back over to Dina, I would like to encourage everyone listening to check out our multitude of seed resources, which are available at dol.gov/agencies/ODEP/state-policy. And please reach out for additional information. Thanks, Dina. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Nadia. I'd like to hand it over to my colleague, Rachel Wright, from the Council of State Governments, to talk a little bit about some housekeeping before we get started.
Hello, as Dina mentioned, my name is Rachel Wright, and I am a senior policy analyst here at the Council of State Governments. Nadia, I would first like to thank you for your remarks, and we will first get into a few housekeeping items on the slide. So closed captioning is available and will appear automatically on your screen. To access closed captioning in a separate window, please utilize the link we'll provide you in the chat shortly. If you have any questions for our presenters, please submit them through the Q&A feature. This is located in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. All questions submitted will be answered during the Q&A session following planned presentations. General comments for presenters can also be sent in the chat to all webinar participants at any time. Also, to reduce noise during the conversation, both audio and visual, all participant microphones and cameras will be muted and turned off. A recording of this webinar will be available to view on our website at seed.csg.org. Slides will also be available in an accessible PDF format on our website as well. And lastly, if you have any technical difficulties or if you have a question about Zoom, please use the chat feature as well to type a question, and a CSG staff member will get back to you as soon as possible. Now let's get started. So we have a great discussion planned this afternoon. First, we're going to learn about the key findings in a state exchange on employment and disability report we released last fall titled The Future of Apprenticeship, Inclusion, Expansion in the Post-Pandemic World of Work. CSG Senior Policy Analyst Sean Sloan will walk us through those findings. Then we will invite our colleague Chip O'Connell from the Office of Apprenticeships, Apprenticeship Data and Performance Technical Assistance Center to describe the current data on individuals with disabilities within the Department of Labor's Registered Apprenticeship Partners Information Database System, also known as RAPIDS. Then we will turn to our friend David Leone to moderate a discussion with 3 state officials who are working in the area of apprenticeships. David is the Director of Workforce Programs at the Virginia Department for Aging and Rehabilitative Services. The 3 states we are going to hear from today are Colorado, Ohio, and New Jersey. From Colorado, we have Denise Miller, who is the Apprenticeship Expansion Manager in Colorado's Office of the Future of Work. She's going to talk about efforts in the state to expand and promote apprenticeships. Then we'll hear from John Hackathorn, Business Relations Manager for Employer and Innovation Services at Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities. John will talk about how the state of Ohio has aimed for more inclusion of individuals with disabilities across the workforce by acting as a model employer and a disability inclusion state. And we will wrap up this conversation with Senate Majority Leader Teresa Ruiz from New Jersey. She will speak about apprenticeship legislation she has championed in her state, including efforts to help ensure the participation and success of apprentices in the workplace once they are accepted into a program. But first, we will have Sean speak on the findings of our Future of Apprenticeship report. Sean?
Thanks so much, Rachel, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm Sean Sloan. I'm a senior policy analyst at CSG, and hopefully some of you have had a chance to check out the report that we put out last fall. It's called, the title is The Future of Apprenticeship, Inclusion, Expansion in the Post-Pandemic World of Work. This is a report that was in the works for quite a while. We conducted some of the first interviews for this project way back in the fall of 2020. And the folks that we talked to at that time were looking back on sort of the earliest days of the pandemic and starting to really assess how apprenticeship programs were ultimately able to pivot to new models as workplaces and staffing needs were reconfigured. This is a report that incorporates input from dozens of apprenticeship program officials and experts around the country and examples from 30 states. Ultimately, what those convey is a sense of optimism about the future of apprenticeships. The report also offers a comprehensive list of suggested strategies across 4 categories for states to consider, many of them based on programs that already have seen success around the country. So let's go to that next slide there. So we note that state officials can promote and sustain inclusivity in apprenticeships by working across state agencies to ensure programs reflect the unique strengths and needs of individuals with disabilities. Collaboration between state agencies and organizations that provide services to various populations and that understand the needs of employers in the state is key. In California, they created an interagency advisory committee back in 2019 and a subcommittee to address apprenticeship for the disabled community, for example. Creating pre-apprenticeships opportunities to ensure those with disabilities have the necessary skills to participate in registered apprenticeships. Pre-apprenticeship programs allow for the recruitment and participation of various underrepresented populations that facilitate increased diversity and inclusivity. Many also offer support services like childcare and transportation to allow apprentices to succeed. Oregon, Washington, and Wisconsin are some of the states leading the way on pre-apprenticeship programs. And one of the states we'll be hearing from today, Ohio, has more than 100 pre-apprenticeship programs. Creating tax incentives for businesses that hire apprentices with disabilities. Some of the states that have done this are Delaware, Iowa, Louisiana, Maryland, New York, and Tennessee. Iowa, for example, allows qualifying small businesses an additional deduction of up to $20,000 per employee with a disability on their state income tax returns. Skipping down a couple, encouraging the collection of disability inclusion data in these programs and assessing the reliability of that data. We're going to hear about what some of that data tells us from our colleague Chip O'Connell here in just a moment. Assessing the advantages and disadvantages to greater inclusion presented by more online focused apprenticeship opportunities and ensuring digital platforms for instruction are accessible to individuals with disabilities. The Department of Labor's apprenticeship.gov website lists a number of ways that virtual apprenticeship opportunities may be beneficial to some employers and apprentices, and to serving inclusivity goals in particular. Things like reduced transportation costs, appeal to new generations of employees, more flexibility for apprentices to complete their instruction, and they help employers widen applicant pools and recruit in rural areas. Next slide. Expansion was another issue that we looked at, and apprenticeships are still widely perceived as an option exclusive to blue-collar occupations and industries. But we did find plenty of examples where expansion is starting to happen, and that has the potential to increase inclusion. State officials can contribute to the expansion of apprenticeship opportunities to more industries by creating competitive grant programs. We're going to hear from Senate Majority Leader Ruiz this afternoon, and in the report we write about the pilot program in New Jersey that she was a primary sponsor on, that awarded $3 million in grants for community colleges, universities, technology companies, training centers, and government agencies to create opportunities in high growth industries, including medical occupations, telecommunications, hotel management, and cybersecurity. Another one here, assessing the public sector as another potential area for apprenticeship expansion. That idea of the state as a model employer, something we talk about a lot. We're going to hear about what Ohio has been able to do in that regard, in part thanks to Governor DeWine's 2019 executive order establishing the state as a disability inclusive state and model employer of individuals with disabilities. Seeking greater transparency on the effectiveness of expansion efforts. Michigan has a registered apprenticeship dashboard that allows website visitors to check the number of active apprentices in the state by occupation and industry. And working with higher ed to assess the discretization of learning. That's a mathematical term, but the person who told us that was really talking about what does it mean that job candidates these days aren't necessarily getting a full liberal arts degree, but they're turning to institutions like WGU to acquire the credentials and skills it takes to actually do a job. Let's go to the next slide. Resilience. This is where those lessons of the early months of the pandemic come into play. States can work to ensure the resilience of apprenticeships by assessing the pivot to remote formats. I talked about that earlier. Emulating work-based learning programs in other countries that demonstrated the benefits of long-standing programmatic flexibility during the pandemic. Working to get pre-pandemic plans for apprenticeship expansion back on track. Some of those expansion efforts took a back seat to some degree as programs tried to hold on to what they had and to reconfigure those existing opportunities. Having state apprenticeship agency employees retasked back to their departments and making additional hires. A lot of apprenticeship office personnel took on other roles and duties early on in the pandemic. Assessing the pandemic and economic impacts on employers. It's important to understand how their needs have changed and how workplaces have changed. And let's go to that next slide. And then finally, one way to ensure that apprenticeship programs are durable and sustainable for the long haul is by strengthening funding. States can work to ensure sustainable funding by identifying and creating champions for apprenticeships throughout state government. Governor DeWine's executive order in Ohio that I mentioned set in motion disability etiquette and awareness training for all 50,000 state employees, no doubt creating many more champions in the process. Casting a wide net in the search for program funding. There are lots of potential partners out there that may be able to assist. Also exploring braided funding, which is that weaving together of multiple funding streams, including state, federal, and private streams. And something we saw over the last couple of years, using funding designated for economic and pandemic recovery to support apprenticeship programs. So next slide. So those are some of the suggested state strategies and state examples outlined in the report, as well as on the Inclusive Apprenticeship webpage that we've been working on that will allow you to click on a map to read about many of these examples. We are happy to answer any questions that you may have about this report at the end of the program. Please feel free to place any questions in the chat box if you just want to communicate a little bit. And questions posed to our speakers can be placed also in the Q&A box on the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. These questions will be answered during the dedicated question and answer session following presentations. And now I am delighted to introduce Chip O'Connell. Chip is a data scientist at the Council of State Governments, working with the Apprenticeship Data and Performance Technical Assistance Center, or ADAPTAC. ADAPTAC is a 4-year collaborative project between CSG and the Department of Labor, focused on supporting states and apprenticeship stakeholders across the country to supply accurate and complete data sets to the Registered Apprenticeship Partners Information Management Data System, or RAPIDS. The center will conduct trainings, provide data analysis, and provide technical assistance to both grow the number of programs supplying data and increase the accuracy of the data sets. If you would like more information about this project or would like to participate in webinars and trainings, please reach out to our colleagues Cassandra Hockenberry or to Chip O'Connell. But we welcome Chip now.
Awesome. Thank you, Sean, for the introduction. So I'm going to present some statistics focusing on apprentices with disabilities. First thing I want to say is that the data that I will be referencing over the next few slides is the RAPIDS data set, as Rachel mentioned earlier. The first thing I want to mention is that RAPIDS is not a comprehensive data set. It only records information on apprentices that are registered with the Department of Labor, and also a handful of states don't report their apprenticeship data to the DOL. So it's not a completely comprehensive data set that has information on all apprentices across the country, but it does have information on all registered apprentices, and it is the most nationally comprehensive data set that I am aware of. So with that, let's jump into the data. If we have the next slide, please. So this first graph is a pie chart displaying the distribution of disability status among all currently registered apprentices. As shown by the purple wedge on the right, 54% of apprentices, or about 225,000 people, reported having no disability, while just 0.667%, or 2,784 people, did report having a disability, which is shown by the small green wedge at the bottom of this chart. Now, the CDC estimates that currently about 26% of adults in the United States are living with a disability. So at just 0.667%, people with disabilities are pretty significantly underrepresented in the apprentice community. One other point I want to make about this graph before moving on, if we look at the red wedge on the left, about 45% of apprentices, or about 189,000 people, didn't provide any information on their disability status, meaning they didn't answer yes or no. Their reasons for not answering could be varied. Maybe they were afraid that their disability status would impact their chances of getting a job, or maybe they just didn't want to because it's optional and they didn't have to, or a number of other reasons. But about 45% of people didn't report their disability status. And one of the tasks that we're currently working on here at ADAPTAC is increasing that rate at which people report their disability status when they register for an apprenticeship. So if that's something that you might be interested in working with us on, please feel free to reach out to us. But next slide, please. So while people with disabilities are currently underrepresented in the apprentice community, their participation in the apprenticeship programs has been growing significantly over the past few years. So this graph is a line chart showing the number of newly registered apprentices who report having a disability in each year, ranging from the years 2015 to 2021. If we focus on the year 2019, there were 1,170 people with disabilities who registered for an apprenticeship that year. 2 years later, in 2021, there were 1,572 people with disabilities who registered for an apprenticeship. That's a 34% increase in the number of newly registered apprentices who have a disability over the course of those 2 years. Next slide, please. And apprentices with disabilities are also growing as a percentage of all apprentices. So this is a line chart showing the percentage of all newly registered apprentices in each year who reported having a disability. If we look again at the year 2019, about 0.74% of newly registered apprentices that year reported having a disability. In 2021, that number was 1.12%. That increase represents a 51% increase in the percentage of all newly registered apprentices who reported a disability over those 2 years. The year 2019 is significant because that's the year that the Department of Labor required all apprentice employers to include a disability self-identification option on registration forms. The Department of Labor had announced the requirement a couple of years earlier, and as the graph shows, the rate at which people report a disability starts to grow in the few years prior to 2019. But before 2016, there were very small numbers of people reporting their disabilities. We're talking hundreds of a percent, very small numbers. But since 2019, all employers have been required to have the option to report a disability. So the growth that we've seen since 2019 is probably a result of both more people reporting their disability because they now have the option to do so, as well as more people with disabilities signing up for apprenticeships in the first place due to efforts to make apprenticeships more accessible and inclusive by the Department of Labor and other organizations and individuals, such as everybody presenting at and attending today's webinar. Next slide, please. Okay, and so this graph is a bar chart showing the number of currently registered apprentices with disabilities in each industry. Main takeaway from this graph is that apprentices with disabilities can currently be found in basically every industry. They are heavily concentrated in the construction industry, where about half of them are currently employed. But construction is also by far the largest industry for all apprentices. Apprentices with disability are slightly more concentrated in the construction industry, but really only slightly. And in general, they follow a similar distribution across industries as the overall apprentice population. And next slide, please. And finally, this last graph is a map showing the number of apprentices with disabilities in each state. The main takeaway from this graph is that apprentices with disabilities can be found in every state that reports data to the Department of Labor. There are 3 kind of hot spots in Indiana, Texas, and California, but these are absolute numbers rather than per capita numbers. So it makes sense that more populated states like California and Texas would have a higher number of apprentices with disabilities. Really, apprentices with disabilities are pretty evenly spread throughout the country, and there's really no one state or region that has a highly disproportionate number of apprentices with disabilities. And so to quickly sum up what the data shows, people with disabilities are currently underrepresented in the apprenticeship community, but their participation in apprenticeships is growing, and they're currently found in every industry and every state. So with that, I will pass it back to, I believe, Rachel.
Perfect. Thank you, Chip. So right now I want to introduce our moderator for the next portion of the program, David Leone. David has worked with individuals with disabilities for over 25 years, including work with the Community Services Board, Community Rehabilitation Program, and the Virginia Department for Aging and Rehabilitative Services. In his current role as the Director for Workforce Programs, Mr. Leone serves as the agency lead on employer engagement activities, the Targeted Communities Grant, and other financial empowerment initiatives. Mr. Leone is a credentialed benefits and work incentives practitioner through Cornell University and holds a master's degree in education from the George Washington University. David, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. I'm really excited to be here today to moderate this discussion with folks who are playing an essential role in the development of apprenticeships in their state. And selfishly, I'm really excited to steal some best practices and ideas as we move forward with our own initiatives in Virginia. First, we're going to hear from Denise Miller. She is the State Apprenticeship Expansion Manager at the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment, where she leads efforts in apprenticeship policy, infrastructure, and partner alignment. Denise serves on the Office of the Future of Work Leadership Team as Colorado undergoes the transition from an Office of Apprenticeship to a state apprenticeship agency as part of an equitable economic recovery strategy. Ms. Miller holds a doctorate in higher education leadership and policy from Vanderbilt's Peabody College. Denise, we welcome your remarks. Take it away.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here to discuss how state governments can create the conditions for inclusive apprenticeships. Soon after joining the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment in 2019, I was in a conversation with our local Office of Apprenticeship Director. She was reinforcing the guidelines for setting the selection criteria for apprenticeship standards. She consistently cited how important it was to ensure that there was nothing in a set of apprenticeship standards that wasn't absolutely necessary for the occupation we were developing. It was at this moment that I fell in love with registered apprenticeship. The act of designing a registered apprenticeship allows a company to reconsider their standard hiring practices and build new pathways to opportunity for people that are often unintentionally excluded. As a woman in leadership with epilepsy, I have often seen how the traditional job posting experience can lead to unintended consequences in the hiring process. I have been on the employer side where a standardized application included a driver's license as the default form of ID for employment, and on the applicant side, where that requirement has made me hesitate to apply for a position I was otherwise qualified for. As I reflected on that conversation with the Office of Apprenticeship Director, I imagine the impact of this registration process as a first step for creating a more equitable employment environment, where sponsors are simply asked, does this position actually require driving? How much employers could benefit from a broadened talent pool? As I have engaged with colleagues in the Office of New Americans, the Colorado Department of Corrections, and my workforce partners, they reiterated that the standardization of this process offers a lot of opportunity for many populations that offer training models that other training models cannot. A mentor of mine once told me, state leaders have to build a system with equity in mind, rather than retrofit systems designed for those that are historically advantaged. After that first training on standards development, I attended a training on equal opportunity in apprenticeship. Here, the trainer went through sponsor EEO responsibilities as a sort of checklist. Hang a poster, make sure to be in compliance. You only have to do it if you have 5 or more apprentices, etc. As I sat and received the information, the training and materials seemed disjointed, perhaps even counterproductive to meeting industry needs and creating a more inclusive economy. Unlike standards development, I realized that one of the challenges was that the ATR did not have a direct connection to the resources that would help an employer be successful in implementing a comprehensive EEO strategy. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility is a specialized expertise, and the resources are found across local human services, workforce centers, intermediaries, and thought leaders who can support companies transform their workforce strategy. As much promise as I had seen in developing standards as part of a transformation, I saw that much opportunity in aligning our state goals and resources with the messaging and process around equal employment opportunity. Our team had recently attended a training by the business development team by the Division of Vocational Rehab. DVR framed EEO completely differently, how individuals with disabilities brought new perspectives and skills, and how outreach partners can provide resources to complement employer benefits. Thinking back on my mentor's advice, I thought, how could we create a system at the state that was more integrated, where equity was built in as part of the benefits of registration, and our public system and resources could be seamlessly delivered to employers and apprentices, thinking about individuals that are underrepresented first. Thank you. Next slide. While our team was looking into the state and federal policies and procedures that can have an impact on sponsors, employers, and apprentices, Our local workforce directors highlighted how the administrative burden of discretionary grants impacts employers and customers. The timing of these two conversations allowed for the opportunity to imagine a coordinated partnership in which a system could be built that addressed administrative, policy, and program barriers all at once. To give some context for those who are unfamiliar with Colorado, every aspect of our workforce and education system is locally controlled, and communities are highly engaged in their own governance and economic development. The default practice under most programs is a direct funding agreement from the state to each of our 10 workforce areas. Local workforce boards have engaged in prior efforts to pool resources or create shared work plans. However, we never piloted anything comparable in apprenticeship expansion. Administrative burden can be overlooked as an equity issue, but if not addressed, can be at the heart of why a caseworker has to look a customer in the eye despite millions of dollars in our system and say, "I'm sorry, you're not eligible for funding to get transportation," or "I'm sorry, we can't help you today with your childcare issue." Having this conversation with our directors, we collaborated to use our federal investment under the Apprenticeship Expansion Grant to co-develop a new model called the Apprenticeship Hub. Under this pilot, a single workforce center serves as the coordinating body for apprenticeship resources and services for the 10 workforce regions. CDLE works with the Hub leadership on strategic planning and program implementation. This model has been a game changer in apprenticeship implementation, allowing for fiscal efficiency, higher focus on customer service, and a culture of partnership between the state and local areas. Thank you. Next slide. With that focus and coordination at the local and regional level, our state staff have been able to shift from focusing the majority of our time on grant administration to strategy, program implementation, and systems alignment. Our specialist team works with program developers in high school, post-secondary institutions, intermediaries, and our Department of Corrections to launch and expand RAPs with equity in mind, having a significant impact on the diversification of industries represented in Colorado. As you can see from this chart, we've had an enormous uptick in our programs developed over the last couple of years, and we have also seen this growth primarily in non-traditional occupations. We've also begun to have more alignment across different funding initiatives, across these different systems, and be able to align our apprenticeship resources so that apprentices that are served by multiple systems can access the resources across all of the various systems. Thank you. Next slide. While our program team was working on apprenticeship implementation, COVID-19 was causing major disruption in our state's economy, and our governor and executive branch recognized the opportunity to make major changes at the state level to address the economic crisis. In 2019, Governor Polis had established the Office of the Future of Work to raise awareness about the future of work. The office was established to understand, prepare for, and develop policy and programmatic solutions to foster an economy that works for everyone in Colorado. Catherine Keegan, our director, was leading these statewide efforts. In 2021, industry drove a major legislative change, shifting Colorado's future from an Office of Apprenticeship, or an OA state, to a state apprenticeship agency. To align the mission and priorities of our state's equitable recovery, the SAA was determined to be housed in the Office of Future of Work within the Executive Director's office at the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment. Our team is currently working under this transition period, shifting from an OA to an SAA, planning with equity in mind. By June 2023, with oversight of the SAA and expansion of registered apprenticeships, the Office of Future of Work will play a direct role in ensuring more Colorado workers and businesses have access to high-quality apprenticeship programs that create a future-ready talent pipeline. Thank you. Next slide. Colorado is at a pivot point with apprenticeship. As we have faced the unprecedented economic challenges of COVID-19, our state leadership has positioned Colorado structurally, culturally, fiscally, and in policy to align apprenticeship, regulation, and innovation. As we launch our SAA, we will be working to connect the dots between regulation on worker protections, our state's vision for equitable paths to high-quality jobs, and the promise of apprenticeship as a tool for employers seeking to tap diverse talent. Our state is leading efforts to be a model employer, with RAPS launching a broad-scale initiative for registered apprenticeship in state government. We also have just launched a hiring preference for individuals with disabilities. We have comprehensive training for all of our personnel out of an EDI office. We're continuing to message the alignment to employers and our entire workforce ecosystem on RAPS as a strategy for the Office of Future of Work, and are looking to innovate for an inclusive economy. Next slide. I've put here some of the things that we're looking forward to over the next few years. We'd love to hear from other states on how you're working and launching on similar initiatives, and would really appreciate connecting on anything that's aligned with these efforts. Next slide. Put here some resources related to all of the initiatives that we spoke about today, various tools and resources our staff has created, both for the workforce system partners and the legislation that we referenced that launched all of our SAA. Thank you.
Wow, Denise, thank you so much. What great information. Just a reminder, if you have questions for Denise or any of our speakers, please type them into the chat and we will ask as many questions as possible at the end of today's webinar. Next, we want to welcome John Hackathorn. He's the Business Relations Manager for Employer Innovation Services at Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities. John will talk about how Ohio's Vocational Apprenticeship Program supports a 2019 executive order issued by Governor Mike DeWine that established a state as a disability inclusion state and a model employer of individuals with disabilities. John, thank you very much, and we welcome your remarks.
Thanks, David, and good afternoon, everyone. I am John Hackathorn, Business Relations Manager in the Division of Employer and Innovation Services at Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities, or OOD. And it is my pleasure to present today on the Ohio Vocational Apprenticeship Program as we recognize the future of apprenticeships. Before I discuss the Ohio Vocational Apprentice Program, I would like to start with an overview of OOD and some of our divisions and services. Next slide, please. So OOD is the state workforce development agency for providing vocational rehabilitation services to Ohioans with disabilities. Through our Bureau of Vocational Rehabilitation, BVR, Bureau of Services for the Visually Impaired, BSVI, and over 300 vocational rehabilitation counselors, OOD serves over 30,000 Ohioans with disabilities to help them find or retain meaningful employment. OOD's Division of Disability Determination processes applications made to the Social Security Administration for Social Security disability insurance and supplemental security income. During federal fiscal year 2021, DDD completed over 133,000 decisions for our customers. OOD's Division of Employer and Innovation Services, or EIS, which I'm a member of, has partnerships with nearly 700 Ohio employers. And OOD is placing Ohioans with disabilities into meaningful employment at a rate higher than before the pandemic. That includes 531 individuals in January of 2022. OOD closed over 5,600 cases with an employment outcome in federal fiscal year 21, almost 700 more than the previous federal fiscal year. Next slide, please. Over 1.6 million Ohioans has a disability. People with disabilities are also historically underemployed and have a higher unemployment rate than people without disabilities. An easy and efficient way to see if vocational rehabilitation is the right path for someone is OOD's online assessment and application portal, oodworks. This, the utilization of oodworks is done in 3 easy steps. 1 is to explore vocational rehabilitation, 2 is to take the assessment, and 3 is to apply for services. And upon completion of the assessment, an OOD representative will be in touch with the applicant within 24 hours to review what the next steps in the process are going to be. Over the last 2 federal fiscal years, more than 2,700 Ohioans have used oodworks to seek services from OOD. Next slide, please. You've heard about this a couple times already. Moments after taking the oath of office, Governor Mike DeWine signed Executive Order 2019-03D, establishing Ohio as a disability inclusion state and a model employer of people with disabilities. Some of the initiatives that the executive order brought forth was the establishment of the position of a statewide ADA coordinator, the requirement of all executive branch state employees that they participate in regular disability and etiquette and awareness training, and the executive order also inspired OOD initiatives that promote the inclusion of people with disabilities in the workplace. This includes the Ohio College to Careers program, which is offered at 17 colleges and universities in Ohio to ensure students with disabilities have the support they need to complete their degree or credential, earn higher wages, and meet the demand of tomorrow's labor market. OOD counselors are located in the disability and/or career services offices at each school to assist students with disabilities. College to Careers also utilizes 2 career development specialists that are colleagues of mine in the Division of Employer and Innovation Services that work directly with C2C participants to align them with internships or employment with OOD employer partners. And since 2019, C2C, College to Careers, has served over 1,000 students. Next slide, please. The other initiative that the executive order inspired was the creation of the Ohio Vocational Apprentice Program. And the Ohio Vocational Apprentice Program, or OVAP for short, even though inspired by the executive order, was established through an allocation in the state operating budget. And the goal of the program is for OOD participants to gain valuable work experience with state agencies, executive branch state agencies, as intermittent employees, and to be exposed and to access state government employment through these paid apprenticeships. The ultimate goal is for the apprentice to secure permanent employment in state government upon completion of the apprenticeship. We'll talk more about that process in just a couple minutes. So since 2019, we have had 28 apprentices who have worked or are currently working at 18 different executive branch agencies or boards and commissions. And this is done through working with each of those agencies and executing an interagency agreement which outlines the roles and responsibilities of each participating agency with the initiative. OOD's initiatives include the partnership with the agency to identify what their workforce needs are and to develop the apprenticeship opportunities. These apprenticeship opportunities are always aligned with an existing state job, an existing classification of employment with the state agency that the individual, the apprentice, can be gaining the minimum skills and qualifications to be considered for employment at that position at the end of the apprenticeship. OOD also assists the participants, the candidates, to apply for the position. We utilize the state civil service application for these positions, preparing them for the interview. They are each interviewed by the participating agency, and also any assistance with completing the onboarding process, which would include the identification of any accommodations that might be needed for the individual in the application or in the initial onboarding of employment. We work to provide any needed and identify any needed on-the-job supports for the individual. And we're also a resource for worksite accessibility consultation and accommodations for the apprentice, for the agency and the apprentice as the apprenticeship progresses. The apprenticeships are can be up to 1,000 hours for 25 hours a week, and the apprentices are paid $15 an hour. Currently, we have 10 apprentices working at 7 agencies in fields such as human resources, IT support, fiscal services, office administration, and as an environmental specialist. 9 apprentices have been hired permanently onto their agencies, and they're earning an average of $20.04 an hour. One of the things that we want to emphasize is that and we do this with the agencies that we're working with, that just because somebody completing an apprenticeship does not mean that they are automatically getting the job at the end of the apprenticeship. One, there must be a job available with the agency for the position, and also they have to participate in the competitive selection process for that position, just like any other candidate would. Next slide, please. So OOD collaborates with State of Ohio agencies on a daily basis in order to provide resources and guidance on the current apprentices and identify new apprenticeship opportunities. Prior to today's presentation, I was in touch, either talking to directly or through email, with at least 4 or 5 different agencies today about various steps we're along in the process of identifying new apprenticeships. Right now we're currently actively working with 3 agencies to develop and identify candidates for apprenticeships in human resources, fiscal services, and office administration. In October, we were given the opportunity to expand OVAP into the legislative branch through a 5-year grant from the Developmental Disabilities Council of Ohio. We are working closely with the Ohio General Assembly to identify apprenticeship opportunities in the Ohio Senate, in the Ohio House of Representatives, and the supporting agencies of the Ohio General Assembly as well. So we're very excited to grow the apprenticeship program beyond the current state, the current opportunities that we have in the executive branch. Next slide. And that is it for my presentation, and I am looking forward to answering any questions that you might have for me at the end of in the question and answer period. So thank you very much again for this opportunity.
John, thank you again. Some great information. We will have a question. Cassandra, I will make sure to ask that first after our next speaker. And as a reminder to everyone, if you have questions for John or any of our other speakers, please enter them in the chat and we will ask them as many as we can as time allows at the end of today's webinar. Our final speaker this afternoon is New Jersey Senate Majority Leader Teresa Ruiz. Senator Ruiz became the first Puerto Rican elected to the New Jersey Senate when she was first elected in 2007. She has been a champion for apprenticeships and expanding employment opportunities for underserved communities, as well as sponsored bill packages to expand apprenticeship programs in the state and increase teacher diversity. The apprenticeship package created more accessible pathways to careers in high growth industries by incentivizing businesses participation. Senator, we welcome your remarks.
Thank you, David. And based on that presentation, just hearing again when I was elected in 2007, it seems like we need an apprenticeship program for women and minorities in elected spaces, probably a space that we should consider as well to grow those areas. I think everyone did. So I'm grateful to be part of this conversation. As the former chair of the Education Committee, the labor workforce in it, as traditionally seen, was not a space that I created a lot of pieces of legislation, but clearly understood that the better prepared we had the students in the 0 to 16 space, the better the outcome for their life growth and the better for our career and labor development workforce. But I got very closely aligned with the conversation of apprenticeship through the lens of equity and justice. I worked cohesively with the Institute of Social Justice here in the state of New Jersey, and it was really an opportunity to say there is a need to make sure that we are training individuals all across the state of New Jersey so that our workforce spaces look exactly like who we are in the state of New Jersey. And so I'll go over quickly with some of the bills that have been signed into law and then some that are in the hopper, getting ready to hopefully get to the finish line this legislative session. The first one was we provided a corporate business tax and an incentive for an apprenticeship program in the nonprofit sector so that thinking about apprenticeships outside of what we all traditionally thought of. Every time I think that even when I talk to colleagues on every different local level of government, they automatically assume that apprenticeships are uniquely tied with union and construction jobs. And so what this package did was really broaden that theme of apprenticeships. We created a task force, which is up and running, and even though it's in its infancy, to be sure that they are consistently looking at these programs as they develop and that they marry the high growth sector with what the apprenticeship program should look like. For a very long time, and I think this is probably something that struck a lot of states across the country, our Department of Labor's had intense labor training programs that were probably training thousands of individuals and then in spaces where they could not be employed. So one key thing that we wanted to do was establish these these opportunities for programs, but also create a livable think tank that would continuously create this dynamic endeavor for the long period of the apprenticeship programs. And a big shout out to our Department of Labor here in New Jersey, particularly in this space, who were great partners and understood what the intent and the need was, and have, you know, they're the ones that are really leading the way in this as far as rolling out the programs. The next one was, which is slightly different, not in the Department of Labor, was to create a youth apprenticeship program in the Department of Education for 16 throughout the years in college. And that was to really have children who are not exposed to traditional high growth sectors get an opportunity to explore those areas. As a first generation individual who went to college, you know, I didn't get those opportunities to go out and explore different work career paths. So because I always had to work to pay the bills. And so this lens was, how do we expose more communities that are marginalized in these, you know, finance areas, hotel, STEM related fields? How do we get them at an early year where they can get exposure to the workforce market, and then they can align it and stack it up with college credentials and their education? The one that really took off, and remember, our bills got signed right before the pandemic. So stats are still developing and programs are still developing, because we know that everything kind of stood still for a couple of years. But we created a 5-year high growth industry regional apprenticeship development program. And that's the one that has been most successful. It was a pilot that was in the north, the central, and in the south part of New Jersey, and in the areas of math and sciences. We've seen an increase both in women in the industry and people of color in those respective industries. We established a 5-year apprenticeship assistance program. I know I heard some of my fellow presenters before indicate. So if there's a woman who wants to potentially explore this space, but doesn't have access to transportation or is in need of childcare, those are 2 obstacles that we attempted to eliminate in this space. And so we do see that there's a positive alignment with not solely creating these programs, but creating the support services that have to be aligned with it so that the individual can thrive during kind of that education incubation space. The other one that was signed into law requires the Commissioner of Labor and Workforce to develop and establish an apprenticeship mentoring program. And the need for that was not solely to get people in these spaces to learn, but also to have someone through the length of that time frame to, oh, I am so sorry. That is my, I apologize for that. To participate in these spaces and have someone who's been in the workforce giving that advice and that mentorship that's so critically needed for, you know, I always think of, I'm partial, I always think of the woman of color who might be entering a workspace that she doesn't necessarily see herself in. And so we were thinking creatively of how do we create a long-term approach. So not only the apprenticeship portion of it, but the long-term employability of that space. We've refiled these bills, which is provide tuition fee waivers for apprenticeship courses. We're giving corporation business tax and gross income tax credits for businesses that employ apprentices in the DO of registered apprenticeship. So we'll go from not solely just one a corporation that will develop an apprenticeship program, but we're also going to incentivize if you hire individuals. And these are all bills that were reintroduced. And I think that pretty much sums those traditional ones. One that perhaps didn't make the report, but I'm most proud of, is that we kind of reshifted how we're going to retrain the next educator workforce, and really considered this a teacher workforce apprenticeship program, where we have on-ramp for current paraprofessionals who spent time in the classroom, how they can stack those credentials and get to a certification process, to better train educators with a longer runway for deeper learning. So it comes outside of the classroom and really learning inside of the classroom, which is beneficial both to the adult and the child, and an opportunity for more trained professionals in classrooms and school to share the work. And so that pretty much sums everything up. These were bills that we worked on a very long time ago. It's great to see the stats that come out of the Department of Labor and what will happen in the next years as we come into this new normal. But as we all know, COVID has really, shed a light on what I think many of us have been arguing for, and that's equity in several spaces. And so if you're a person who, not because of lack of love or will from that family structure, but was relegated to a public school space that didn't offer you an excellent public education, that innately creates obstacles. What happens to an individual that doesn't necessarily get exposed to different workspaces in the financial arena? So I just think about my experience. There were probably so many things that I would have dipped my toe in my adult career space had I had either an opportunity to train in a unique kind of program, or even to have a mentor in that space to say, think outside of the box. There are really some non-traditional workspaces that perhaps don't have a Teresa in it, that doesn't have a woman in that space, but that could really be wealth both for the company and for you when it comes to that collective consciousness. And I think I really rooted my policy lens in this space. Thank you. Too fast, too slow? Feel free to ask me a question, Dave.
Senator Ruiz, thank you so much. That's great information. And we can go to questions, but I did want to say one of the things you mentioned that I think to shout out to those on the call who participate in vocational rehab is that one of the things we do really well is help individuals with disabilities become exposed to the world of work and as many potentials within that as possible. So I would be remiss if I did not piggyback and say it's another value add of a program a lot of folks don't always hear about. But with that, I will go to questions, and as I promised, start with Cassandra Haynes' question, which was specific for John, and that was, how receptive were your agencies, organizations, in partnering with the OV apprenticeship program? Was there any resistance, and if so, how did you approach this?
Thanks, David, and that's a great question. I would say from a concept standpoint, there's absolutely no resistance at all. We did a very proactive approach in reaching out to the agencies and certainly utilizing the support that we had from the governor in establishment of this program as a good entree. As any I wouldn't call it resistance or reluctance. It was just working out the identifying any issues that we might encounter with each agency and a particular position. But as I talked about it earlier, within the interagency agreement that we execute with each of the participating agencies, them having the assurances that we're there to provide any additional resources and support when it comes to the providing on-the-job supports or accommodations. That was something that came up quite a bit when in individual talks with the agencies, but we were able to work with them through that. And then as we go along from an historical standpoint, just seeing the results that we get from the apprentices who have participated and the performance reviews that we get back from them have been extremely helpful with expanding the program into other executive branch agencies, and also quite helpful with our current expansion into the Ohio General Assembly. So what I would say is that just certainly being upfront, available, transparency, and also treating each apprenticeship opportunity as unique and individually as you can, because each job is different, the work environments are different, the candidates that we're bringing forward also possess unique skills and qualities as well, and abilities. So Just having that daily interaction with the agencies is an integral part of its success.
Thank you, John. Next question is for Senate Majority Leader Ruiz. What are some things that state legislators can accomplish to help drive apprenticeship programs forward?
So clearly, the one thing that we can do is to, we know that the corporate business sector and different agencies respond to incentivizing programs. And so I always see it through this way. We know, and I think all of you know here, that these kind of initiatives work, but you always need the data to back that up. So clearly, if someone doesn't want to undertake a huge program or allocate so much funding to it, I would suggest highlighting a pilot program, because then you're going to generate the data and the facts so that when you're arguing that for budget purposes to say, hey, we have these workshops specifically designed for the disabled community or whatever academic policy lens, or an answer also task force if it doesn't get created within the department structure and needs to be legislatively done.
Thank you. That's great. Our next question is from Andrew Johnson, and I think this applies to all three of you. How can state leaders help schools incorporating apprenticeships navigate cost and local workforce opportunities in an equitable manner? Not sure who wants to go first.
Yeah, I can start. So one of the things that we think about very closely is sort of the difference between the funding that is sort of at the very high level that we receive at the state, maybe at a state agency, and then what is available to the individual. And so one of the sort of principles we live at the Office of Future of Work is, if you think about the student or the employer and you walk through the actual experience, how would they actually pay for the books? How would they actually pay for the tuition? How would they actually get access to launch their program? What materials can they pay? And then we look at each of the funding streams and how we've allocated those funding streams or what the allowability of those funding streams are, and see where the gaps are in the system. And I think when we start thinking about things in such a concrete fashion, we then we're able to say, okay, career and technical education can actually not fully launch a youth apprenticeship. Where does workforce have to partner? And really go through and think about it from a zip code, from a human being, from a employer, really start going through each of those user experiences. So that's one of the things that I would say from a first design principle. And then the second piece of it is really having each person on the team be a leader. So the grant coordinators on our team are really trained to look at all the rules and then really create briefs, create recommendations to leadership on where they see barriers from a grant management perspective. Our program designers really think about where they see barriers from a registration process. So really having all the personnel on the team be assets in creating equity in apprenticeship.
Thank you. Anything to add for our other panelists?
The only thing, and I think Denise really laid it out concretely, right? Like walking through it, which I think is always the best thing, setting up those kind of mock trials. The key in all of this too is to not, we have to be creative and think untraditionally, which I think is where the conversation around apprenticeships is. And the higher ed organizations have to play a role in all of this. So it's not solely just them. So when we think about CTE and maybe coupling up credits to the county community colleges and or a STEM college that's in the neighborhood, then you kind of shift also the paradigm of what the benefit is to the student also long term in the big scope of one of the biggest conversations that we have in this country, and that's affordability for higher ed.
It's a really good point. Thank you. We have another question in the chat that is, how do you market apprenticeships to individuals with disabilities? Thank you, Dina. And that can be answered by any of our panelists.
So New Jersey, we have a great network of advocacy groups that that partner with a lot of legislative offices. And traditionally, all those training programs have been called workshops, right? And they have a revenue line item in the budget. And so we would utilize all those spaces to really be a connective level as the task force sees the unfolding, if in fact we're not getting the participation from the different subgroups that we want to see elevated in those workspaces. The other thing is in the youth space is to partner up with school districts that are specifically aligned with this group to be sure that there is a complete pathway, specifically in the time frame, which I know this is something that probably faces all of our states and thought leaders, is when individuals age out of specific programs, how these apprenticeship programs can become another link in the sustainability of that individual's life.
Makes a lot of sense. Anything to add, Denise or John?
With the Ohio Vocational Apprentice Program, we utilize our network of over 300 counselors, our internal job developers, and also network of external job developers to promote the apprentice opportunities as they come along in order to identify appropriate candidates for that. Now, in terms of alignment and coordination with registered apprenticeship programs and pre-apprenticeship programs, OOD is also aligned with Apprentice Ohio, which I know contributed quite a bit to the report that was cited earlier. In fact, we have an Apprentice Ohio representative coming to an event, a career event that we're having in Southwest Ohio on March 4th, where over 300 high school age students will attend. And there will be an Apprentice Ohio representative there. So we're working with promotion of the vocational apprenticeship program with our internal and external network, but also alignment with Apprentice Ohio to identify apprenticeship opportunities for individuals with disabilities.
And just one thing to add, under our hub model, we have a coordinated effort of apprenticeship navigators, which is a system of local career service resource networks that work with job seekers, and then they partner with the disability service navigators through a partnership with DVR. This is a newer initiative that we're sort of rolling out that's more on the outreach side. And then I put on the slide deck, one of the things that we're really interested in learning from other states on is sort of social media micro-targeting or sort of micro campaigns. So we'd love to hear any strategies from the group on specific strategies that folks have used for maybe paid social media or social media efforts.
Thank you, Denise. I'll just add to that. One of the things we're trying here is we're doing career cafes with our students, and we're trying to pick speakers who have lived experiences similar to the people we're trying to reach, where they're highlighting their experiences within their apprenticeship and trying to train our counselors to better promote this as a path forward. We have several more questions have come in, and the next one is for Senate Majority Leader Ruiz. You've said that COVID shed a light on equity concerns. How has that been reflected as you all have reassessed your apprenticeship programs for the future? Maybe that's actually a question for everyone.
So what I meant to say, if it didn't come clear, was for many of us, we always knew that there's many spaces that haven't dealt with truth and honest and who we are in this country and in our states and in our communities when we're creating policy. And that equitable issues have plagued every system infrastructure for long before any one of us were born. But we have to be truthful, honest, and courageous in creating policy, or we stay on the cycle, the hamster cycle, and keep repeating the same things over and over again. What I wanted to say was that the pandemic forced people who weren't necessarily in tune with these equity spaces to have a reckoning with the truth that's been facing our sectors. How it will shape the apprenticeship programs here in New Jersey, that was the basis for when we started it. So I partnered with the Institute of Social Justice in that very same premise to say, there are high growth sector markets, there are untraditional spaces, there are places where people can gain training and turn their life around in a way where their quality of life improves because their income that they begin to generate is quite different. And so that's the space where these pieces of legislation were born. So I don't think it necessarily changes. It just that COVID-19, I think, just broadly, created a more national broadcast to say, these are not issues just facing New Jersey. These are issues that plague every community in the country. I hope that kind of answers.
So before I answer the question, Dave, point of clarification, that 5-county transition expo that I cited earlier is actually on March the 3rd. So I want to make sure that, and that will be covering a 5-county area in Southwest Ohio where over 300 high school students are expected to attend. So our experiences with the pandemic and work from home, it definitely, not only from an agency standpoint, and all of the services that we deliver, certainly made us forced us to be creative, and we needed to really pivot and move on the fly as it applied to all of the individuals that we were serving. Now, for the program, for the apprentice program, at the time, all of the apprentices were working in office. And then most, if not all of them, were either had to go, work remotely, or unfortunately, because of the, just the sudden nature of everything and the inability for the assignment and supervision of work, a few of the apprentices were furloughed as well. So during that time, the ones that were able to work from home, we worked with the agencies very closely in order to find any type of accommodation that might be needed for the individual for them to work from home. Then as time progressed and we saw we are not returning to the office at any time, and also the agencies feeling better and and having a better grasp and understanding of how to assign and supervise work, we were able to get several of those previously furloughed of those apprentices back to working again and able to complete their apprenticeship. So it, again, from an agency standpoint, in terms of what we did with services to our all of our participants, was impacted in a very profound way, but we also had to work very closely with each of the agencies and each of the apprentices as well.
Thank you,
Can I add to that, David, that the one thing I would say that would shift, so in thinking about some of the impediments, and I think John alluded to this with the rollout of what they did, I would suspect a lot of our programs in the department stalled because we were just dealing with the volume of unemployment cases that plagued every single Department of Labor and took precedence over launching any new initiatives. But the same way that we were trying to eliminate obstacles like with transportation and childcare, we know that during this crisis, I mean, something keenly that we became aware of in the ed space is access to technology and broadband, which would be something to include in future discussions to be sure that if in fact we have to switch the light in our household and turn it off in the public, that people who would be training in these programs not everyone has a computer or a tablet, and certainly not everyone has access to broadband. And that we know is a rural, urban, statewide issue.
No, that's a great point, and really important for folks to think about, especially as some of these positions may be done remotely. We have another question from Doug Keast. If starting from scratch and designing a fully inclusive apprenticeship program, who do you see as the drivers in design? And that can be for any of our panelists.
Look, I think some of these groups were already, I'll take you. Some of these groups were already mentioned before. And I don't necessarily think, to be honest with you, outside of creating the incentive pieces, these programs can really get developed out of the administrative side, right? But I think it's always best when you have thought partners all around the table. So advocacy groups, the corporate business sector, the business and industry association, the higher ed institutions, the K-12 systems, and other departments that could also kind of co-combine in the space, whether it's the Department of Children and Families or DOT, to see how they can kind of fill in gaps when discussions are being had more globally.
Yeah, I would say at the systems level, one of the things that we can start with is really looking at it from a top level agency perspective and making it easier for sponsors and employers to access all of the resources that are available. So when we are rolling out any RFP, any sort of funding initiative, having the expectation that one of our goals of that funding is an equitable and inclusive apprenticeship, but also have any funding initiatives or resources that we have across our different agencies paired at the time of that application, rather than giving a bunch of siloed funding, which can be really hard for an employer to navigate, to make a bunch of separate applications. I think at the program level, we have, obviously the employer has to be one of the first drivers and really has to see that value and have that buy-in. So I think definitely to piggyback on Senator Ruiz and tap into all of the expertise in the community, but there needs to be internal advocates, whether that's a hiring manager, a human resources person, someone who in the company says, I'm going to be a supportive mentor to the individual and make sure that when the apprentice comes on board, it's going to be a positive experience. So I would say that would be my recommendation.
And for us, I can't underscore how valuable it was to have the executive order in place and the full support of the governor as we move forward with the establishment and expansion of OVAP. But beyond that, it was also the being able to interact with the agencies and provide them the assurances of the assistance and resources that are available from the vocational apprentice, from OOD as a vocational rehabilitation agency as well. I think that goes a long way with the expansion of the inclusiveness of individuals with disabilities, not just for this initiative, but with registered apprenticeship programs and pre-apprenticeship programs as well, which we have also worked very closely with the Ohio Apprenticeship Council on.
Thank you, John. And I think we are just about out of time for today's webinar. I'd like to thank all of the speakers today. Thanks to Dina and the team from CSG and our friends at the Office of Disability Employment Policy. And thanks to everyone who attended for your attention today. We really appreciate it.